I am made to sit in many, many boring meetings where the whole meeting is about giving information, top down. And I have hours of these. And when questions are asked in meetings, I may offer something that's kind of analytical or kind of brings up something that's related. And there's no answer because the boss can't divulge, thinks that she can't divulge stuff because it has to do with upper levels and politics. So I don't feel motivated to ask questions after a while. And then I realized that what she really wants is to test our knowledge. So she's asking questions like, okay, what are your questions? I'll see how much you know by asking this question, and then I'll tell you, how it really is. And um, when I needed her to help me make decisions and give me guidance about how to proceed with a program, she would waffle. Well, we've got A, this is good, blah, blah, blah. But you can also do B, and B is good, and B is good. Yeah. And then sometimes A, but then yeah, I think B is good, and then A is good, and it was impossible to follow. So part of my exasperation as that employee after years of this was like, I'm confused. I don't have the room to be creative. I'm gone.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Before we get into another question, a couple of the things, the common misperceptions, I would say, as a leader or manager, is that particularly when you're dealing with your top performers, there's an assumption that they're always engaged or that they can self-motivate, and that we typically maybe are not developing them and fostering their growth, and asking the right questions tends to be one of those things. A lot of the top down, like you said, and the tell instead of ask. And we overlook some of the warning signs that are right there in front of us, and they can be very subtle. But you said for years this was happening. So oftentimes, like, the leader might be like, I don't know what happened. They performed really well, but there's always little signs along the way. So that level of self-awareness will be really important as a leader and a manager to
Yeah.
shift a little bit of perspective from, what do I need from my employee to what do they need from me? How do they work best? And then those annual performance reviews. I've been working with clients recently that seemingly out of nowhere, they get not a great review,
Yeah.
and finding out that there weren't conversations prior to kind of lead up. Like, there's always small actionable steps you can take in the meantime. So you want to have those regular growth conversations. And
Yeah, you want to have conversations. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's about listening and connection, right? If you're disconnected because you are telling all the time and you're more concerned about the level above you than the people who are reporting to you on your team, and you're assuming that they're fine because the general results are good, you may
mhm,
be missing a huge piece. And I think for leaders, there are a lot of people, well, for anybody, a lot of us don't know how to listen. We've never thought about how we listen or
mm,
whether we're listening, right? And in this culture, for sure, there's an added component, and that is that many, many of us are very uncomfortable with silence.
yes.
So we're not willing, right? It's difficult for us to sit in a room with someone or even with a team where people may not be as forthcoming as we would like with information or ideas or reporting on status. And that makes us uncomfortable. And we don't have the skill, as you point out, of asking questions necessarily. So then we get very nervous. We feel like we have to fill the space,
Yes.
right? Because maybe we have an idea that, oh, leaders are the ones who have to know everything.
Hmm.
So my test for whether or not you're listening, one way to kind of Think about it. If you're that leader who lost that high performer, take a moment and think whether you can remember any ideas that that person brought to you over the years, either one-on-one or during a meeting. Can you remember what kind of input they brought, things they wanted to do? And if you can't remember anything, chances are you weren't listening.
And what you had said too about the silence, like there's so much power in the pause.
Yeah.
And so when someone's talking, we tend to just jump right in with our answer, like I probably just did. And or we interrupt with, because it sparks ideas, like from a human behavior perspective, especially for passionate. I know for me, when I interrupt, it's because I'm really passionate about something. And I'll jump in and like, oh yeah, and this idea and this idea. But the power of the pause and that practice of someone says something, whether it's a statement or a question, and then just count to 3, just a quick 1, 2, 3 before you engage in the conversation, and leave some space for them. So I can glean from what you said what maybe would have allowed you to stay with that company or that leader. But is there anything specific that the leader could have done that would have changed the trajectory of that?
Absolutely. So a leader in that position, that example, for me, if that leader had learned how to facilitate meetings better, use meetings as an opportunity to connect, that giving information from a PowerPoint is not the same thing as having a conversation. It doesn't engender connection, especially, and there are companies that do this, especially if you don't have your cameras on on a virtual meeting. So it's just black talking on a black screen and then a PowerPoint, and that's it. And people can be fully tuned out and you'll never know, right?
Yeah.
So running meetings in a different way, that means getting some pointers about how to do quick icebreakers, or just ask powerful questions, ask open-ended questions during a meeting. Well, what do how do you feel about this issue? What might be one approach we could take to this? What have you tried already that hasn't worked, and why do you think it didn't work? There are all kinds of questions that a curious leader could ask, and that immediately makes the people in the meeting actually feel heard and feel like the leader is interested, right? This is basic stuff. So asking questions shows interest. Mm-hmm. And when somebody feels like the person is showing interest in them, they'll be way more inclined to speak up and bring some ideas, rather than having someone say, here's all the information, what are your questions? And then everybody going, oh. It's the skill of creating connection.
Yeah.
We could talk about this for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. The in terms of meetings, right? This could be group meetings, one-on-one meetings. One of the actions and practical implementation of this, particularly in one-on-ones, kind of similar to what you were saying. A lot of one-on-ones are like, what are you working on? There's no connection there. It's very tactical. And so a proactive approach is, and kind of perspective to come from in those one-on-ones to engage your employee or the people on your team and direct reports, is to really understand the questions, asking the powerful questions, not the tactical or the yes or no questions, but questions like, what part of your work do you find most energizing?
Yeah.
Because if we can get people to work from a place of what they are naturally inclined to be interested in, or in the way that they take action. We need to know that about the people that we work with, both our peers and the people on our team and our direct reports. So
Yep.
the question that you ask becomes important, not just asking questions. And so what part of your
Exactly.
work do you find most energizing?
Yeah.
What's one thing that would make your job more fulfilling?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is not just a tactic to get people to talk more. It's about real human relationships. We spend 8 or 10 or however many hours a day
More of
working,
our time. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And then we spend 7 hours sleeping. And so work is a huge part of our lives. And if we don't have functional relationships, right? If the
Mhm.
leader feels that they don't know their people and they're not supposed to know their people because, quote unquote, that's chit chat. Why would I ask you how you're doing or what excites you about your job? If they come with that kind of, preconception about what a leader should be, they're missing out and they're shooting themselves in the foot, so to speak, right? It's not good for a leader to have team members who feel disconnected because they're not connecting via one-on-one conversations where they do ask questions that are meaningful. And
Mhm.
that comes back to bite them. It costs them time and money in the end because if those employees leave, then they have to spend time recruiting, they have to reorganize to get that person's duties covered, all of it. So the self-awareness about who you are yourself as a person, what
Yeah.
you need in the workplace, and then that helps you um, think about the people who work for you and beside you also as full humans who require not only clear instructions and a clear job description and a clear statement of work, but also a connection,
Mhm.
emotional connection with you and with the people around them, that you are actually a community. Without that kind of awareness, it's difficult to keep a workplace going where people are motivated. It's difficult. We don't tasks tasks are not enough, and task discussions and status discussions are not enough. The whole old adage about, leaving your emotions at the door and being professional in the workplace, that's impossible. We can't leave part of ourselves somewhere else.
It
We take
erodes
our
trust.
whole person with us no matter where we go.
Yes. Especially now, right, with the virtual. Um, well, before I wrap up, one last thing to add is connected to the leadership in action we did last week about avoiding conversations. You can have the conversation and ask, have you ever thought about leaving and what made you stay? And really get into the inner workings of who is on your team. So some of the reasons that these stay interviews work is similar to what you were talking about. The things you were talking about erode trust, but these development conversations, these one-on-ones with connection, will help build trust and show
Exactly.
people that their contributions matter. So,
Yeah, it's an investment that a leader should make. Without
yeah.
it, things can go wrong pretty quickly.
So, final reflection for everyone, just think about one immediate thing that you can do going forward and see if you can implement that this week. And we'd love if you join us next week. Next week's session is about leading consciously. Are you leading consciously, or are you just reacting? Thank you so much, Janet, for being here. Always enjoy our conversations, and we'll see everyone next week.